best and safest learning environment for all children in Glenview. So with that in mind, please share your comments gracefully, with the mindset that all of us are role models that our children emulate, and everyone's goals are connected and shared. So I'd also like to point out that Mr. Corman isn't be joining us tonight, and we want to wish him and his family condolences on the loss of his mother-in-law. And with that, I'd like to proceed to our public tax hearing levy. I'd like to call a meeting to order. For verbal attendance of board members, starting furthest to my left, please state your name for the record. Note that in the absence of Mike Corman, Jim Baumstark will act as board member secretary pro tem.
Diane Stefani.
Scott Nelson.
Natalie Jektorowicz.
Jim Baumstark.
James Dolan.
Okay. Eric?
Hello. Good evening, members of the board, community. Tonight is the hearing on the 21 tax levy. Resolutions tonight that will be voted on will include the tax levy resolution, the tax levy resolution directing the county clerk to reduce the levy in certain funds, and the supplemental levy to capture CPI increase for the 2019 bonds. Just a couple quick slides. As we went over last month, the newest information that's been available is that the village will be closing the Glen TIF 1 year earlier than anticipated. In order to calculate the amount that this board would like to capture, we've got on the slide what the 2020 county EAV for the tax code for the Glen TIF for District 34, what the frozen EAV was and the balance, which is the $430 million. That alone can be captured with the expiration of the TIF. Changes after speaking with the county are as follows on the screen here. There is an O&M fund rate maximum. And so in order to not come close enough that we would lose any dollars, we've shifted just about that amount over to the ed fund, and we'll capture a little bit more in the ed, a little bit less in O&M, so that we don't risk losing anything. That's the only change that's coming from the tentative to the final. And here's the final levy that's being presented tonight, still showing cap funds 30% increase, still anticipating just over 22% for the final extension.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Miller?
So the only change is that one reallocation item from our last discussion on
Exactly.
this, right? Yeah.
Okay. Are we ready to move on to the next section? All right. So this is our public tax hearing levy comment section. And this is an opportunity for audience comments. Kathy, do we have any comments in the tax levy hearing?
We do not. I have not heard from those in the overflow room. There are no comments from the...
Okay, so I'm going to try and save some time here without reading all this. And I'm going to ask for a motion and a second to adjourn this public tax levy hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, this hearing is closed. We'll move back to our regular meeting. That brings us to the communication section. Dr. Deli?
Thank you. If you just give us a moment, we need to transition briefly. We have some students with us this evening who are going to perform. They just need a moment or two to migrate onto the stage. So just bear with us just a minute, please.
Hey, Dave, while we transition, we forgot to do a yeah. So I forgot to skip this section of the approvals, the approval of the agenda. I'd like to have a motion and a second to approve the agenda for tonight.
So moved.
Natalie?
Second, Baumstark.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And then I'd also like an approval for November 15th, 2021, regular and executive session minutes. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Natalie, motion.
Second.
Diane, second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Now we're ready.
Scott, did you get through what you, okay, thank you. So we are very fortunate this evening to begin our meeting with some very special guests. Some of our District 34 musical talent has joined us this evening. Mrs. Tobias from Hoffman is the band instructor there. Thank you very much for being here. She has brought several of her students with her to perform for us this evening. I would like to introduce them. Maybe, if you can, I know you're so properly positioned with your instruments. If there's a way to signal for our audience who you are when I say your name, that would be great, if you can do that. Right. Hannah Babcock. Hi there. Emma Barrias. Hello. Eliza Brick. Kevin Crow. Alex Geist. Ravi Gill, Mia Hublin, Ryan Hillman, Olivia Lee, Nina Lovrick, and Ryan Stender. Have I missed anyone? If I pronounced any names incorrectly, please forgive me. Okay? Thank you so much.
And thank you, Dr. Silverman, and everybody for inviting us today. We're just going to play 3 short songs to kind of get us into holiday moods. We'll play Jingle Bells, followed by Jolly Old St. Nicholas, and then Ode to Joy.
Thank you so very much. We have a certificate for each one of you. Maybe you can...
Thank you. Thank you.
Good job on the trombone.
Yeah, good on trombone.
Great job.
That's my instrument.
Jim, did you recognize an instrument?
I did. No, trombone. I'm a trombone player.
Nice.
I do have, oh, good evening. Thank you, parents. I'm sorry,
They got here somehow, Dane.
pardon me?
They got here somehow.
Yeah, well, yeah, it dawned on me that they probably didn't just walk. So I do have a few additional comments I'd like to make this evening before we get on with our other business. I would like to reinforce some of the events and the messaging related to the adaptive pause for 8th grade students at Springman that began on December 8th. As we have stated since March of 2020, students are best served when they are in school with their peers, with their teachers, in the safest environment that we can accommodate. This has always been our primary objective, and nothing has changed. We have also stated since March of 2020 that we will follow the recommendations issued by the Cook County Department of Public Health, the Illinois Department of Public Health, and the Illinois State Board of Education, specifically related to COVID-19 mitigations. There are times, unfortunately, and I underscore unfortunately, when it becomes necessary to temporarily exclude some children from in-person learning who have tested positive for the virus, who have been deemed a close contact to the virus, or when children are identified in what county health officials define as an outbreak. In the case of Springman Middle School, we first learned on December 1st of 3 classrooms with clusters of multiple students who tested positive. As the exclusion process ensued for those students impacted, and because the school was unable to ensure 6-foot social distancing at all times for the 60 impacted students, outbreak testing was then employed, and an additional 2 positive cases were identified. Our duty as a reporter to the county health office resulted in that agency's epidemiologist recommending both verbally and via email that the entirety of Springman's 8th grade class begin an adaptive pause until the start of winter break. Those students are currently receiving remote instruction and will so until that time. Adaptive pause, while not a preferred modality, is the standard that has been applied by state and county health officials and by the Illinois State Board of Education specifically for these types of situations. We very much look forward to having our students back with us in person for in-person learning. We will also be investigating the possibility of rescheduling any missed extra and co-curricular events lost by virtue of the adaptive pause. As we approach the start of a new calendar year, the administration and school board will stay abreast of any contemplated changes to current recommendations set forth by the Cook County Department of Public Health, and will continuously review the impacts that mitigations have on the teaching and learning process, and consider adaptations as new information becomes available as we move forward. Finally, I would like to thank Mrs. Russell, the building support staff, the Springman 8th grade teaching staff, and our students and parents for the extra effort that has been required in navigating this difficult situation. That concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Deli. Does anybody have any questions? All right. We will move along to our next section, which is audience comments. This is the first opportunity for audience comments. Anyone wishing to address the board can submit a comment card. It's available at the check-in table, and give it to the Director of Communications and Strategic Planning, Kathy. The director will call community members who submit cards forward. They will be asked to introduce themselves and describe their relationship with the district. If a community member in the overflow room wishes to make a comment, they can give the comment card to the D34 staff member on duty in the room. Please know that the board will be taking notes, and we will be in listening mode only, and an appropriate response will be given in a timely manner. We also ask that you submit one comment per opportunity. We will have a second opportunity tonight. Kathy, do we have any comments right now?
We do.
I also ask that we keep our comments to 3 minutes.
Svetlana Dragosevich. Did I say that right? And if you'll come to either one of the tables so you can speak into that.
Okay, so I'm Svetlana Dragicevic. I'm a resident here, and yeah, I just wanna, this has been really hard, and I'm trying to make some common sense out of this, and I'm really struggling with it. I'll talk specifically about my situation, that my son had COVID like 4 weeks ago. He was in the quarantine for 4 weeks without any symptoms, and he did his civic duty. He stayed at home. He didn't play sport, nothing, just to come back to school and then being sent home again. So you referenced a couple times CDC guidelines and Illinois Department of Health, and over there it says within 90 days that if you had COVID, even if you were exposed, you don't need to quarantine. So what right you have to make my kid stay at home and play Fortnite instead of being with his friends and playing sport? And I won't even talk about like school, that's another thing. But I'm trying to make a common sense. And if we had this conversation 2 years ago, I would say, I support you, what do you need from me? We are now 2 years into this. There is no long-term plan. We are just putting Band-Aids with this. We are not accomplishing anything. At this point, whoever is not vaccinated, they made that choice, and they should deal with it. Like, virus is with us. I don't know what else to say. We have to move on. You're hurting kids. It's a mental abuse. It's a mental...
Can we not do any clapping so that her comments can be heard by everyone?
Say again?
I was asking him to stop clapping so we could hear the rest of your comments.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's a mental abuse. You're abusing kids, you're abusing parents. I don't know what else to say. Like, it's just beyond. We are all intelligent human beings, so we can't blindly follow this anymore. This has to stop. You're hurting our kids. My friend told me she was looking for a therapist. Her kid is suffering. There are teenagers isolated in the house. They can't do that. Like, they can't handle that anymore. And I know you're saying, I understand and we support you, but what you're actually saying, I hear you, but I don't care. That's it. And we are prioritizing like restaurants, movies, and everything over schools. I mean, I'm from Bosnia. I was 4 years in the war. I didn't miss even like a week from school because schools were priorities. We have to keep kids in schools. It's not a solution to send them home. It's not.
Thank you for your
Thank
comments.
you. And you heard.
Next is Lynn Drake.
Hi, my name is Lynn Drake. I am resident here and actually have 2 kids in District 34. One is a 6th grader and one is a 5th grader. My question is, I'm also, just like Svetlana, trying to make sense of this. If the 8th graders are asking to stay home, to me that means that there is a huge outbreak in the pandemic throughout the spring and middle school. Then why is my 6th grader going to school? He's on the same floor with the 8th graders. That makes absolutely no sense. The 8th graders have siblings who are also in school with other children. If all 8th graders are being on quarantine, then all of their siblings should be on quarantine. But then the fifth graders are going to school, fourth graders are going to school, sixth graders are going to school, seventh graders are going to school, and then the eighth graders are staying home. And from what I heard is that the eighth graders are getting together and they're going to the movies, they're going to the pool. So the kids are having the time of their life instead of going to school. That's mind-blowing. And then those kids are going to go to high school, and the value of education is just going down, not by like a year, it's like going down every day. And this is the start of it. It makes absolutely no sense. Either every kid goes to school, or they all have to do e-learning. And if the e-learning is not the answer, then everybody has to go to school. This is just, it doesn't make any sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
Paul Kelly?
Hi, my name is Paul Kelly. I live at 1215 Elm Street in Glenview. My wife Jennifer and I have lived here for 16 years. Kids have gone through the community for the last 13 years through the schools. A couple of things I want to pick up. Well, first of all, my wife and I, hopefully you've recognized, are the ones that started the petition over the weekend, and part of that was really to just get your attention on how important this issue was, and to make sure that this doesn't happen in January or February when we come back, because that absolutely can't happen, okay? For a lot of the reasons, as the ladies before me stated better than I could. You know, we said at the beginning, hey, we all want the same thing. I'm gonna tell you, a lot of people in the community don't feel that way, you know? You may say that, but the actions and so forth that you have and that you're doing doesn't say that, doesn't communicate that, right? So maybe you have the best intentions, but the actions aren't playing out that way. I'll ask a question. Have you ever gone to a doctor and followed their recommendation exactly? Or you ever said, no, I'm going to try somebody else, go to a second opinion? I've done that a lot. I have had advice to have a surgery once. I decided against it. It was the right thing to do. It seems like what I've heard is you follow the recommendations from Cook County to the letter, and there's no ingenuity or no decision-making here. You basically take it and put it. That's your job. Your job is to, if you want to work with us, work with us. Work with us. All right? Communicate with us. Don't sit in a bubble, cut and paste. Anybody can cut and paste what Cook County says and just send it over. Okay? Work with us. You cannot follow the Cook County guidelines to the letter. They specifically state you need to adapt that to your local issues. Who says 6 feet has to be the right thing? Work with us. We can come up with a plan to make sure the kids stay in school. As they said before, we're 2 years into this. Everybody has been either vaccinated, they've been testing, they've been wearing masks, they're doing everything possible to stay in school. They test to stay. They test to stay. And they test to stay, and then they're told to go home, okay? And what happens is the message, unfortunately, comes through that says, hey, unfortunately, I know you're going to have to go home over the holidays. Now, most important, don't go out and, you know, congregate with your friends, 8th graders, 6th graders and 7th graders, you're fine. 8th graders, you have to stay home, because if you do, we're probably going to be in this mess again in January 3rd, which is saying it's your fault. You're the one that's not doing it right. No, you're not doing it right. Don't blame the kids. You're pitting the community against each other, vaccinated versus unvaccinated. Most people know that plenty of the kids who tested positive, some of them were vaccinated. Okay? We know that. That's a fact. We're pitting each other against each other. So work with us. Okay? I'm here to work with you. I will offer my services privately, publicly, so will my wife, in any way, shape, or form, to come to agreement to make sure the kids stay in school. That's what we need. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Keller.
Matt Lorenzel?
Hi, thank you for having me. Like my fellow citizens and my friends here, I don't agree with the decision that was made to send our 8th grader to remote learning. My wife Amy and I have lived here for 18 years. We've had
I'm
3
sorry,
kids.
can you speak just closer so that people at home could hear
Can
us?
I lower this a little bit?
Not really, but you could just pull the microphone closer.
My wife and I have lived here for 18 years. We've sent 3 kids through school district. I think that my concern is the echoing of the policies that we keep hearing from March of 2020. And my hope is that we've learned something since March of 2020. I think that we need to revisit and reevaluate whatever criteria we've been using to make these decisions, because I think they've been the wrong decision. I think the remote learning has been a disaster. I think my children, lots of friends' children, are in therapy. They've fallen behind intellectually, emotionally, socially. They're suffering. Our families are suffering. Our community is suffering. And I think that we need to reevaluate. We're surrounded by other communities and other schools, Catholic schools, other public schools that did not do this. And I think we need to have a public hearing about what criteria, because I agree with Paul, we have to make sure that this does not happen going forward. This cannot happen. And I'm worried that it's going to, because we're using half-baked criteria that were that we came up with in 2020. So I think we should have a hearing, we should have a discussion, maybe bring in OLPH, maybe bring in, District 30 that didn't close down, and maybe we should be figuring out what they did that we should have been doing, or that we should be doing going forward. Because I think nobody, looking back on this, would make the determination that we did this the right way. I think that we made the wrong decisions. I think we've done the wrong things. I think we were well-intentioned. I'm not calling anybody a bad person. But I think we messed up. And I think our kids are paying a price for it, and we need to make sure that it doesn't happen again.
Thanks for your comments.
Thank you.
Amy Lorenzo?
Hello. I'm Amy Lawrencell, and I just have 2 quick requests. One is very simple. Could we please not have our school board meetings the same night as 225? If you need help coordinating that, I'm more than happy to make that happen. My second request is that we have some kind of town hall forum, because this situation feels more like, the listening mode doesn't work in light of situations like what's happened in the last week. And the lack of information, or the changing information we're getting from you guys. There were 2 emails sent out on Tuesday, for example, both from Ms. Russell. The first one I read as we're having an adaptive pause, and then I went home with that, and then I started hearing rumors that, no, it's not just an adaptive pause, it's also quarantine. My child is not allowed to participate in the community. She's not allowed to go skating. She's not allowed to go to church. Was that recommended from the CCCDP? Or did you guys come up with that? If we had a forum where we could have Q&A and discussion and debate, I think it would allow you guys to clarify, and it would be better for the community, because what happens is, in this vacuum of information, there's unintended consequences of us parents trying to figure things out on our own, and we all know how that goes on social media, not well. So if we had another way to discuss and get information, clarification, there wouldn't be this chasm, this division that's happening in our community. And it could even be on Zoom, given that we're in this endemic, we could all have discussions on Zoom. So just 2 requests, thank you.
Thank you.
Karina Trapp.
So I have two children, a second grader and a seventh grader in this school district. My daughter plays basketball for TIA. Apparently, a few weeks ago, someone raised a complaint about the players not having their masks on over their mouths and noses the entire time that the kids were playing basketball. So I'm here today to raise my complaint. As an infant, my daughter was hospitalized for 2 weeks with RSV, and since then she's dealt with asthma, for which she's been hospitalized several times for. Daily, she takes 2 different inhalers and other medications to keep her asthma in check, and especially during the winter. So it's incredibly frustrating and infuriating as her mom to attend her basketball games and to have to sit and watch her work even harder to breathe because she's forced to wear a mask during this game. But what burns me about all this is that on several occasions, I've walked into this very building only to find that some of the office staff are not wearing their masks. Personally, I don't care that they aren't wearing their masks. I can't blame them for not wanting to wear one all day long. I wouldn't care if anyone in this building was wearing a mask or not. But when I have to watch my daughter hustling up and down the basketball court, struggling to breathe, while the adults are governed by other sets of rules and expectations, that makes me angry. It is pure hypocrisy. I know this board's answer is that their hands are tied. You're just going by what the state says. Rather than finding the right solution to all this, you cower behind Springfield, enforcing nonsense, requiring 12-year-olds to wear masks in hot gyms while running up and down a court. It makes absolutely no sense. Who are you keeping safe? At least for my daughter, it is certainly more detrimental for her to wear a mask while playing basketball. I believe this community has far greater issues to concern themselves with than trying to control and require kids who are playing sports to wear masks. What is the student mortality rate in this school district caused by COVID? As far as I'm aware, thankfully 0. That isn't to say that the effects of COVID haven't been detrimental to the students of this community. Over the course of the last 20 months, we've had a GBS student stab another student to death, a GBN student commit suicide, and just this fall, an ATIA student threw a chair over the 3rd floor balcony, seriously injuring a 6th grade student who required surgery because of this. This doesn't include all the vandalism, bullying, and mental and emotional challenges the students of this school district have had to endure over the last 20 months. I ask this board, to what end are we going to continue all of this? What metrics do we need to reach to finally allow schools to return back to normal? At what point will you allow parents to decide what is best for their children and their families? Thank you.
Thank you.
Matthew Richards.
Good evening. My name is Matt Richards. I'm a Glenview resident. I have 3 children here in District 34, 2 middle schoolers and a 4th grader. I don't have any kids at Springman, but as the board knows from my frequent emails to them over the last several days, I've been sufficiently exercised by this latest situation to come here tonight. Look, I'm a big supporter of District 34. My wife serves with the PTA. We've been big supporters of the Glenview Educational Foundation. These are great schools. I'm not gonna go over again all of the problems with remote learning. I think you've all heard that tonight. There's nothing I can tell you about my family's experience with it that I think even compares to what others in the audience could tell you about it. What I will say is that you are, but just by following the rules you have to follow, putting the families of this district into a terrible position. Right now, based on the latest COVID tracker, there have been more than 900 close contacts in school to date, this school year. If you assume that every one of those close contacts had to stay out of school for at least 10 days, that's 9,000 days of lost in-person instruction, And I understand that you have to make those decisions because the state of Illinois makes you do that, but that's 9,000 days of lost in-person instruction, okay? That is on top of mask requirements, which, look, my kids don't mind, so they'll do it, but I recognize that a lot of people don't like it, right? And other restrictions, like separation at lunch, right? Like the ridiculous cover my daughter has to put on her trumpet, right? Like all the other silly little adaptations we have to make to the situation that we're in. And now you've put us in a position where, look, I'll be honest, I'm sure I disagree with some of the people in this room, and that's fine, but all of my children are vaccinated. I'm vaccinated, I support that. And in part, we did that because we knew that once that happened, my kids would never be close contacts. They would never have to worry that as long as they didn't get sick, they didn't have to leave school, right? But now that's not the case, right? Because the situation at Springman, it's gonna happen again, right? I'm not saying you're gonna close the school again. I hope you don't do that. But an outbreak, it'll happen again, right? This is an endemic respiratory virus. It'll happen again. It might happen at Atia, it might happen at Pleasant Ridge, it might happen here at Westbrook, I don't know, but it'll happen again. And you've got to do better, okay? Because you've put us now in a position where we have no ability as parents to keep our kids in school. And we have to have that ability, right? We have to be able to keep our kids in school. There's just no way that you can shut down the schools permanently, because for those of us who believe in the schools, you're just not giving us any options, right? We have to be able to keep our kids in school, okay? You've got to do better. I believe that every single one of you has the best interests of our children at heart. But we've all come too far that good intentions just aren't going to cut it anymore, right? If the Cook County Department of Public Health is telling you to do something, you've got to push back, okay? You've got to tell them there are other solutions.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. It's over 3 minutes. I appreciate it.
You shut down Springman a week and a half in advance of winter break. That's a 2-week adaptive pause that everyone was going to take all by themselves.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Theodora Bogdan.
That's that? Perfect. By now you know my name, right? I know. I speak almost every single month here. Nice to see you everyone again. But I'll introduce myself to the parents that don't know me. My name is Theodora Bogdan, and I'm a parent of a 2nd grader at Hanking. And I've actually spoken to this board ever since August. Not because I choose to be here, but because I choose to fight for the freedoms that this country gives me and the reason why I ran from a communistic country. Freedom of speech, freedom of choice, freedom of doing what you think is best for your family. Now, I want to address the fact that we started with making the children wear masks. Most parents didn't care, like the people before me have mentioned. And you know what? I've been fighting for this from day one, to have a choice for remote or at school. Everybody should have a choice whether to mask, not mask, whether to vaccinate, not vaccinate. It affects every family different and every person different. This is why when we spoke and nobody gives us any answers, what did you guys tell us to do? Our hands are tied behind our backs. So what can we do? Bring a lawsuit, and that's what we've done. Now, I want to let everybody know what our lawsuit is here for, because they told us they have no choice. This is so not true. Everyone has a choice, and every parent here is asking you the same thing that I've asked you along with many other parents since August. Push back. You can do better. You have to push back. The CDC, Pritzker, IDPH, Dr. Ezike are just there for recommendation. You have to do your job, and you have to work for our children. If you're not here to do for our children what is best for them, instead of listening to where the money comes for COVID relief, the $5 million that this district got from them with the CDC guidelines, this you have to look at all of these aspects. And if people don't know, they have to do their research, because they need to know what's happening here. You need to fight back. And if you don't, you know what? It was 3 of us talking here in August, and you said you were laughing at us because it was 3 out of 8,000 students. Well, you know what? Our petition brought in hundreds of people. Now this petition, it's almost 1,000 parents standing up for something new. Every time you guys take an inch, You guys are gonna get pushback, and pretty soon, it's gonna be the full district, because no matter what, it's a matter of time, because you guys piss off all the parents. You have to do something,
Thank you for your comments.
and you need to vote. You need to vote. There needs to be a vote.
Good evening. My name's Tom Kopchak. I have a daughter in first grade here at Westbrook. We are new to the district, and I want to thank you guys. I'm sure you guys are trying to do your best through all this. I'm sure none of you thought this would happen when you took your seats. I just want to make everybody aware. My daughter's eating lunch on this gym floor. I have to imagine it's this gym floor that we're all walking on every day. 5 days a week, she eats on this floor with a plastic tray. You guys are all aware of that? You are? Why don't you guys eat with them on the floor 5 days a week? Would you enjoy that? I mean, what are we doing to these kids? Do you understand the mental health implications this is going to have? I mean, this is ridiculous. And you know what? I keep hearing you guys are governed by the state. If that's true, give us some metrics that you're working with. Let us know when it's going to stop, what it's going to take. Does that seem fair? We haven't had any communication with this. We don't know what it's going to take. When are we going to take the mask off? When are we going to let kids be kids? That's all we want to know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that's our first session of audience comments. Thank you for everybody who spoke tonight, and I'm glad everyone got to tell us their thoughts and their feelings. I appreciate it. We will now move to consideration of resolutions. This is the consent agenda. We have 21-130, the personnel report, 21-131, the payroll warrants, 21-132, vendor warrants, and the 21-133 TRS supplemental savings plan. Does anybody have any questions about those? I'd like to ask for a motion and a second. Oh, Jim?
On the supplemental savings plan, that's just enabling the new savings plan that TRS is like optional for tier 1 and tier 2, is that?
That's right. This is just a compliance piece for the board. Any new employee after 1/1/22 is going to get enrolled in that plan anyway.
And that's mandatory, right? That's like a tier 3 almost kind of a thing?
Yes.
But it's going to be optional for tier 1 and tier 2. So it's just like the formality of making this happen. Just making sure, okay.
Thanks, Jim. Is there a motion and a second for the approval of these?
So moved. Sorry.
Second, Jim Baumstark.
May I ask for a roll call vote, Katie?
Mr. Heggie. Aye. Dr. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Nelson.
Aye.
Ms. Jack Torowitz. Aye. Mr. Bonster.
Aye.
Ms. Stefani.
Aye.
All right, motion passes. Now we move to section G, consideration of other resolutions. We have the 21-134 resolution to approve the final 2021 tax levy. Now, we've talked about this about 3 or 4 times. Does anybody have any questions for Eric as we move forward? Could I ask for a motion and a second for 21-134?
So moved, Baumstark.
Second, John Eggy.
All right. Can we have a roll call vote, Kitty?
Jack Torowitz. Aye. Dolan.
Aye.
Bonster.
Aye.
Heggie.
Aye.
Nelson.
Aye.
Stefani.
Aye.
All right, we have the 21-135 resolution designating the funds to receive a reduced extension if required under the property tax extension limitation law. Any? Moved by John Heggie. Second?
Second, Dolan.
We have a roll call vote, Katie.
Nelson.
Aye.
Dolan.
Aye.
Bonster.
Aye.
Heggie. Aye. Jack Torowitz. Aye. Nelson.
Aye again.
Oops, sorry.
Aye.
We have the 21-136 supplemental tax levy resolution. It's just building on what we talked about earlier, right?
Exactly. Just allows us to capture CPI increase for the 2019 bonds that the board issued.
All right. Is there a motion?
Well, actually, I just have a question on this. Is this actually increase the levy, or is it just increasing the DSEB limit?
So this is not DSEB. This is the first referendum approved debt for the construction. And just because of the conservatism of Chapman, because they don't know future CPIs, they're going to ask this board to adopt a resolution like this each time a new CPI comes out, just so we can capture CPI above what the prior year's extension was, to make sure we can pay off principal and interest on the 2019 bonds
Is
this
this
year.
number 3? I thought it was related to DSEP.
This is number 3. It's not DSEP, this is,
Okay.
This is something that we did,
it's a formality for our bond
yeah,
issuers.
when we're not issuing new debt, this is always going to be brought in front of this board each year when the new CPI is announced.
We didn't have this before in the past because we didn't have referendum debt. Got it, Jim?
Oh, okay. It talks about the DSEP in the memo. I'm just
Yeah.
making sure I understand.
Yeah,
Like,
it's just a reference point, but if this is, you know, the first bond issue that the district did wasn't associated with this.
okay.
Is that good enough? Is there any more discussion, or? All right, I'll ask for a motion to approve.
So moved, Peggy.
Second?
Second, Jack Torowitz.
May we have a roll call vote, Katie?
Stefani?
Aye.
Nolan?
Aye.
Tom Stark?
Aye.
Peggy?
Aye.
Jack Torowitz?
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye. Moving along to 21-137, construction update and furniture purchase.
Would you like to do the construction first or the furniture? Go ahead, if you want to say.
So I'll just briefly reference the report that is in the board packet this month. We received a 60% design cost estimate. We've detailed what the overage is in the memo, and you know, we wanted to make sure the board had this context before we talk about the furniture purchase and the overage that we are, you know, dealing with right now. New estimates will be coming soon. In my memo, we referenced January. At this point in time, we've been told we might not be quite ready for a 95% design cost estimate update in January. So we'll have to work through exactly when that will be available, when we can bring that to the board. What we're trying to do is give enough time to the board to both present information and options for this overage, I'm calling it, for phases 2 and 3 in construction. But before we ask the board for a vote on furniture tonight, because of the timeliness, we just wanted the board to be aware that at this point, based on a 60% design, the numbers that we've got in the memo are what we're currently facing.
Just to clarify, the January 10th meeting is what, right now, we're questioning whether or not we'll be prepared with the 95% SD as we anticipated. We don't know that for sure yet, but we wanted to signal that.
Does anyone have any
I
questions?
mean, how does this fit into the overall project budget? That's really more, you know, if an individual component turns out more expensive, maybe we're not so concerned if it can be offset, or is this like trickling into the entire project or putting the contingency at risk, or how should we think about the fact that it's 5 million higher or whatever?
So if you recall, we were asked to try and make a $155 million estimate work with $150 million. And if you recall, the bids came in just about 5 million below estimates the last go-round. So if you want to look at phase 1, you could sort of think about it in the way that we kind of made up what we were up against, the challenge of that 5 million. We are preserving budgeted estimates for phases 4, 5, and 6. So we are just looking at phases 2 and 3 now, because that's the bid specs that are being designed and soon will be out on the street for bid, that we're going to ask the board to approve in March. So this is the second big bid, and it's just where we're trending right now. I'm not sure these numbers will change dramatically going into a 95% design estimate or the final bids. So I think you could look at phases 2 and 3 just in isolation. Furniture is obviously a part of this.
We know we're over on furniture.
Yeah.
We anticipate being over on phases 2 and 3, the extent to which we won't know until those bids are returned. They can be structured in such a way, however, that certain components of those bids can be peeled away if we start to need to go through and make any kind of modifications for that.
And there's also consideration for timeline, considering the supply chain issues, is that correct?
That's part of the need to ask the board for a vote on furniture tonight. We just didn't, we've got this 60% estimate, and I thought, even though we're not quite to the point where we could do a full board presentation from Nicholas, given the fact that we're asking for dollars over what we budgeted for furniture alone, we wanted to make sure you were aware of how we're currently tracking.
Is that enough for everybody right now? I mean, and clearly, we'd like to find a way to save as much money as possible. Right?
And we will bring options to the board for consideration in all different kinds of ways. What we're trying to do is get 2 board meetings together for discussion so the board has time in between the meetings to, you know, think, discuss, and give us some direction so that when March comes, we're able to award contracts to these subs that, in a way that meets the board's overall goals given these challenges.
So if I can ask a clarifying question, this is not to execute the order, it's to say this is a material change to what was previously budgeted, and we want to increase to operate underneath that number, and you're going to bring back to the board a recommendation under those purchase agreements when you actually execute the orders. For the furniture.
For the furniture, that's correct, for the furniture
Okay.
only. There's more to be told on these
Yeah,
phases.
a lot
We
more
just
on the
wanted to
construction,
signal
but
that
like-
where we're
okay.
trending, yeah.
But furniture, we're asking to have a discussion and a vote tonight just on furniture.
It's just to raise the limit on what the budget is for that.
Correct.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right?
Right, and that's why I was asking, like,
Yeah.
how does it put the total project total? Because the way I think of it is we have the bond proceeds and we have.
So was it
our-
about $1.5 million over?
Just in furniture, that's right.
Just in furniture?
So that contributes to what we're, you know, predicting to be an overall overage for those next 2 phases of the work.
Yeah.
So it's just, it's awareness. That part of it's more awareness.
Okay.
But we do
Okay,
have to fill
yeah.
these rooms up with furniture.
We got to buy the, I mean, no, I'm not
Yeah, right.
trying to,
Yeah.
just,
So one of the things we wanted to do, you guys all saw, everybody saw the memo, it's in the board docs. What I wanted to do is just quickly provide perspective on how we got to the point we're at as it relates to furniture. And so, and you might not be able to see, and I apologize for that, and we'll post this online. But this is a map of the timeline that we've been talking about furniture throughout this district. And what it provides is a perspective of our conversation actually began well before the referendum. Began in 2013, Scott would remember as a member of the GEF, when we were awarded a grant from the GEF to start the discovery process. And subsequently from 2013 to 2013-15, we did discovery. We had a grant that allowed us to redo the Lion LRC and explore the furniture that we had and that we were looking to get. We also redid the Springman LRC through district funds. Again, another opportunity for us to explore the furniture, decide, tweak, move through items that we liked and didn't like as we progressed through the discovery process. And then there's multiple, I'm not going to read each item that goes on there, but we did begin a learning space team in 2018 of teachers from every building. We started a pilot group from the GEF sponsor in 2018 as well. The middle school started a pilot group originally in 2019, was supposed to start in the spring of 2020. Obviously that was hit a little differently. We did not start the pilot group officially until this year, where they've been working through the furniture that they had. And ultimately it got us to a point where we worked with FGM, Frank Cooney, our furniture provider, reseller, district leadership, construction team with Nicholas and Associates, where we met weekly beginning in June to fine tune every single classroom, every single space throughout this district. One of the things that we did do throughout the process, looking at the trend data in terms of costs, is we did begin to tweak slightly finishes that we had as it relates to furniture throughout the district, meaning not classrooms, but certain offices that may have been done previously or were not in need of an immediate touch. We would put them on a different timeline as it relates to furniture moving forward, helping us ensure that as part of the referendum in the movement of all of our classroom space, that we're able to accommodate that. One of the things in terms of pricing, as you noticed in the memo, is that based on from 2020 to 2021, overall furniture costs increased in the area of 25% in education. It increased almost unilaterally across in furniture in general, and that's where our cost increase came. The actual coverage is for the same. We did move fine arts into this program mainly because of our looking at fine arts, doing furniture, and not being able to complete alt bids for fine arts as it relates to our overage in the construction. So that's where we're at right now, and looking at, because of the supply chain issues, one of our greatest concerns is when you order, not receiving it for the start of school, and making sure that that comes in. We have been advised to order the sooner the better. One of the other important components of this is that we did lock in our pricing for the next 2 years. So this is not a number that's going to fluctuate based on the economy, based on CPI that just shot up and inflation. We actually locked in a 2-year price for the 2022 Phase 1 and Phase 2 purchase and the 2023 Phase 3 purchase. The Phase 4 and Phase 5 purchases are only Springman, and they are a limited number of classrooms, I believe 8, and the cafeteria.
All right,
Any
thank you, Brian.
questions?
Does anyone have any other questions?
I'm just glad to hear that we locked in
Yeah.
the prices, because I don't see this going anywhere but up, so.
Correct.
Good, thank you.
And I'll make one other note. You know, we tapped into our membership in a national purchasing cooperative. And so what that allows us to do is there's language in someone else's bid, another municipality, another state, that locked in at these prices. And so by being a member of the co-op, we're able to tap in, avoid doing our own bid because one's already been done. And I can speak to the fact that Frank Cooney is working with us on pricing, and we're getting the very best pricing we possibly can, even given, you know, the bid and the surcharge right now. I think they're giving us a good price.
Quick question on that, Eric. Did we confirm that there's actually inventory?
So that it's in inventory. So the
Or
way in
will
which,
be?
Yes, we have worked. We have met with each of the vendors with their corporate sales and their corporate management. Obviously, this is a big purchase for any district to make. The way in which we're doing it is unique. Most districts do small, one school, take 15 years to move through. The uniqueness of this is that it's basically a 2-year cycle to get everything going. So we were fortunate to be able to meet with management at most of the companies to talk about what is currently stocked in-house and what has to be manufactured. That's why when we get the order in, they will specifically, some of it, a lot of it is made in Europe, and we'll specifically begin the building process for delivery. The way in which delivery is going to take place is it's going to arrive as soon as possible to our Frank Cooney, where they will store it. Upon the completion of school, we will bring in as early as possible Phase 1 furniture, so that would be all the new addition furniture, and place it in gyms like this or other locations where we're not doing current work. Phase 2 construction obviously is taking place this summer, and that's going to require a lot of work up into August. That furniture is to arrive in June as well, but not here, to their warehouse, to arrive here August 1st, to be staged and put together in other classrooms and then moved into the classrooms upon completion and preparation. That is both a part of the contract with our furniture provider themselves, as well as work that we're setting aside to do this summer.
Thanks. Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second, Baumstark.
May we have a roll call vote, Katie?
Dolan.
Aye.
Tom Stark.
Aye.
Peggy. Jack Torowitz. Aye. Nelson.
Aye.
Stefani.
Aye.
All right, 21-137 passes. Moving on to 21-138, resolution to adopt a notice to remedy. Mr. Dorkin, do you have any
input?
Just that we recommend the board adopt the notice as presented.
All right. Any other questions on that? Can I have a motion in a second?
So moved, Jack Torowitz.
Second, Haggy.
A roll call vote, Katie?
Peggy?
Aye.
Dolan?
Aye.
Jack Torowitz?
Aye.
Tom Stark?
Aye.
Stefani? Aye. Nelson?
Aye. 21-138 passes. And our last one in this section is 21-139, asbestos Phase 2 exhibit.
Good evening, Board. In front of you is an exhibit for the Phase 2 abatement work that has to be performed in order to move forward with Phase 2 construction. And back in June, the Board approved a master agreement with High Engineering, our environmental consultants, with the purpose of including exhibits as we move along during this construction project. So in front of you is the exhibit for recommendation of approval for the Phase 2 abatement work that has to be done at the 7 schools moving forward.
Does anyone have any questions about this?
This is not going to be just, did you want to ask something?
No, I'm asking
Oh, I
you.
thought you said Diane. Okay.
Natalie. Yeah.
Got it. This is in no way going to disrupt children's classrooms, spaces where they're going to be breathing and moving and...
No, the work is scheduled to be performed over spring break and starting the day kids get out.
The
in
stuff
June.
being performed in spring break, the air will be clean for them to breathe when they come back.
Correct. Part of this exhibit is having High Engineering monitor, test, clean, and sign off on all the work that's being done over spring break.
I just wanted to make that clear, and as best as I can tell, you guys are doing it the right way.
Yeah,
I just had to sneak that in there.
Yeah, thanks. Well, and make no mistake, the interior areas of some of the buildings will definitely appear to be under construction after this abatement takes place. It'll be safe, it'll be clean, but it will be obvious that something was done over spring break, for sure.
Okay.
Well, I'll take the layout, because I'm sure it'll come one way or the other, but is this in accordance with CPDPH safety standards?
Yes, yeah.
Thanks, John. Are there any other questions for Mr. Ruelli? I can't see it. All right, is there a motion and a second to approve?
So moved, Peggy.
Second, Stefani.
And may we have a final roll call for this?
Dolan?
Aye.
Tom Stark?
Aye.
Peggy?
Aye.
Jack Torowitz?
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye.
Stefani?
Aye.
All right, the motion carries. Now we're moving on to the discussion section of our evening. And we're going to start with the Teaching and Learning Illinois State Report Card.
Yes, thank you very much. Good evening. I'm excited to share with you tonight the release of the Illinois Report Card for school year 2020-21. We refer to it as the 2021 School Report Card. And I'm just going to highlight a few areas and make sure that everybody's aware that this is a public website. It's illinoisreportcard.com. And all this information can be perused at any time via the web. And so the landing page, you can search for any school district in the state of Illinois. And when you enter the school district's website, you will see some warning signs because we're talking about last school year's testing cycle. So impact on IAR, impact on student growth, impact on summative designations. So one example here to bring to your attention, the summative designation is actually based on a matrix of test scores, student attendance, a variety of information, and it's growth-based. So the state is not able to provide a summative designation, so those are not available for this year. And then another big factor is growth is not available for this year as well, because again, we did not take IAR in the spring of last year. I'm sorry, 2 years ago, for them to make a growth metric for this year, because it's based on progressive assessment of the test to be able to show growth year over year. I'm going to move into the academic progress. And again, you'll see some sections where there's a sort of a warning sign or information that is a possible delay. Another interesting impact last year with the pandemic, typically we take the state standardized testing, that being IR, the DLM, the science assessment in the spring. ISB allowed for districts to take the assessment in the spring or actually in this fall, which is interesting. So the data delay could be based on that, and actually the state information has not been released yet because they're still calculating the fall district test data. So over on the left-hand side here, you can drill down into any information that is indeed available. I'm going to go to the participation rate just to show you again, and I apologize, that's really small up there. Let me see if I can. Oh, let's see, that did not. Let's see if I can scroll down. A little bit better. I'll narrate a little bit more. So typically what we would see, I'm actually going to go to the 2019 testing cycle. This is typically what we see. The state requirement is 95% or more of your children assess on IAR, DLM, and the Illinois Science Assessment, ISA. So you can see from 2019, we had 99% in ELA, 99% in math, and 98% in science, which would be our trend data. When you go to 2020, again, the administration did not occur, so that's what it looks like. And then when you get to 2021, last spring, we see that we have 83% in ELA, and this is participation rates, 83% in math and 75% in science. And this is when we were in full remote as an option, and then a hybrid. And so the administration of these assessments was only allowed to be in person. So again, that was a huge variable back in that section of history, whether or not families and children would come to the district to take a standardized assessment. So just to point that out. I would like to move over now to some performance information. And again, you can see this is our aggregate. So this is all 3rd through 8th grade. And let me just zero out a little bit here. So it exceeds is all the way to the right, then meets is that green section, and then approaching partially met and did not meet are to the left. So this is English language arts, our 2021 district aggregate, all children together. And you'll notice there's no state information, which would usually be compared right here. Then there's a reminder that there's no 2020 data, and you do have to go back to 2019 to compare the Illinois assessment for readiness. And you can see the state here, and then our performance meets, exceeds, and that's for ELA. And similarly for math, again, you can see the 2021 data, no data for 2020, and then there's a state data. At some point, we will be able to see the state data. I've heard April, so hopefully we'll have some information to be able to see what's going on at the state level. I want to jump down into the students. Well, so the district environment, we do hear a lot about the climate survey, and the way the climate survey is administered is through the 5 essentials. 5 essentials is a building-based assessment. It's a survey, actually. And so you could drill down into an individual school, you'd be able to see the 5 essentials results. At the district level, they do not aggregate it for us to be able to look at it. I'm going to jump into the student section. Most of this information is stable when we do compare trend data, and again, as much as trend can occur with the pandemic, pre, during, eventually post. It is something that we've been talking about, though. Enrollment is down, and again, all of this is trend data information. And you can see what the state reports. You can go in back as far as the state has been collecting this information in this current report card format. You can see trend information. So there's a lot of opportunity to disaggregate and then to see different years and compare and contrast. But when we do go back to the big picture, all of these other categories are pretty stable year over year, and it's the same for last year as we move into this school year. In terms of attendance and mobility, and student with IEPs, all of that information. And really, that was the kind of the high level I wanted to share with everybody. Again, it's IllinoisReportCard.com, and all of this information is available.
Thank you, Dr. Silverman. Does anyone have any questions? We'll continue to look for more updates as the state provides more data.
Yeah, I guess that was just going to be my question is, what additional data points do we, like there's gaps in the data. We can accept that. And so the ability to draw conclusions and or take directed actions as a consequence of that may or may not be founded in actuality, right? And if you go through the entire report, you can ask more questions than you can infer answers from out of the data.
Right.
So, absent the data, we're going to make one set of actions that we're going to experience because of the on-the-ground experience of the teachers and the administration and the staff and the students. And then prospectively, we would use the data to establish a trajectory going forward. When are we going to have that, or when can we, are we not going to re-normalize, if you will, for 2 years? Or do we think that this year is going to provide us the context by which we can actually benchmark against 2019, knowing that's still not an appropriate progression in comparison?
Well, so something like the Illinois Assessment for Readiness is based on the Illinois Learning Standards, and some would say it's actually a measure of our capacity to implement those standards and then actually teach them effectively. Fortunately, those have not changed. So in terms of the day-to-day teaching and learning and lesson planning, our teaching and curriculum-based metric is still the same. This test will remain the same. I think more importantly, though, we also always try to triangulate, and we'll talk about that in the next presentation, but we also measure with NWA and Ames Web, local assessments. So we contextualize this deeply. This is an anomaly year. We understand that our scores in general are trending the opposite direction, but again, it's so erratic, the different experiences that children have had. So we believe this year is a bit of a recalibration, but moving forward in terms of rigor, our curriculum, it will kind of pace itself out. This spring, though, may be another learning curve in terms of working through this post-pandemic, where, again, I don't know how to classify this school year exactly, but you raise a good point.
Thanks. Appreciate that. Thank you. Is everybody ready to move on to the next discussion item? All right. I'd like to move to integrated comprehensive systems for supportive positive outcomes.
Thank you. We realize it's a mouthful, but we're going to try to boil down really what we're talking about here, which is a structure of response for some of what Dr. Silverman has laid out for us, which is that even pre-pandemic, we had some specific student areas of growth that were not acceptable and remain unacceptable even throughout the pandemic. And to Dr. Dolan's point, it's readying a system to begin to right-size that. And we have historically some groups of students who are not performing as well as we would like to see them. And this structure really gets at a district-wide commitment to seeing that improve. So our first two slides here really are just, they should look familiar certainly to the board and hopefully to the broader community. We do have a multi-year strategic plan that guides our work. It is specifically connected to the presentation that we're giving this evening in the following areas. I won't read these slides to you, but fundamentally the first strategy that supports our vision and core values as a school district really gets at equitably and responsibly allocating time and resources into the work that we do. That could come through human resources, other financial resources, the resources of time. We talk about scheduling, certainly costs associated with migrating from a part-time kindergarten model to a full-time kindergarten model, and the impacts that we anticipate that having positively. And then the next slide is under our student success and well-being goal, which really gets at using data to provide differentiated instruction and to help us identify where there are certain growth areas that we really need to focus our time and our energies and our resources, which we will get at. So these first two slides are really just designed to let you know that the work that we're embarking on is closely tied to our strategic plan.
So when we think about our why and what is our why, it's our education of the whole child. It's providing holistic learning opportunities for our children. It's maximizing their potential. But when we take that a step further, we need to be able to measure parts of that and pieces of that, which some things we do, as you see in these examples. And then sometimes we use standardized tests. And in this case, just to point out here some of the other points about the why, you can see these bullet points in terms of achievement gaps on the Illinois Assessment of Readiness, which we were just kind of referencing in the aggregate on the Illinois School Report Card, the science assessment in the same way. Again, we look at achievement gaps in terms of year-over-year growth and academic improvement on Ames Web and NWA. We also look at rates of growth for aggregated information as well. You can see this it's a common approach to all of our standardized testing and the system in which we look to improve to ensure, again, that we're maximizing the potential of every child and that they're growing year over year. And our newest measure, which has been super powerful in practice, is social and emotional learning measures, which will reference in a data report addendum that is included in this presentation just as another point of reference, which has a lot of detail. It actually breaks out and sort of exemplifies in detail the most stable data that we can reference, which is a few years ago. Again, I didn't feel last year, even the year before, in terms of growth, fall to spring, using that information. So as you review that data addendum, you'll see it's mostly 17, 18, and 18, 19, where I can ensure the fidelity of that information is shared accurately.
So as you all know and have heard before, we continue to address the disproportionate status that the district has for identifying our Hispanic students as being learning disabled. So as you can see, we've had some small successes in addressing the significantly disproportionate, but we're a long way from being off of that status. Overall, we have over-identified Hispanic students as having a disability. Currently, we have 24% of our Hispanic students being identified as having a disability. So we have been working for the last few years on areas to address this, and Raquel's going to discuss some of those measures that we have taken to help our teams understand the impact and how to better support our EL students.
Right, so we've been fortunate at every building to have teachers who are committed to serve on cohorts, where they have participated in co-teaching cohorts, part of the multi-tiered system of supports, professional development that has shifted to an online format, but even so that they were able to learn through that experience, and becoming more supportive of offering intense intervention opportunities in the classroom setting. So all of these experiences have increased the ability for students to work more closely, the multilingual students to work more closely with their peers in a classroom setting rather than being pulled out.
So kind of pulling this all together, it's really about a responsive system, right? This is a framework, ICS. It's responsible. It's a framework of comprehensiveness and integrate systems that our kids need. It's our responsibility to engage in best practices.
And when you think of what a responsive system looks like, it hits on a couple different outcomes, as you see above. Climate and culture will be positively impacted by having a comprehensive system. Embedded in the ICS framework are activities and belief systems that allow us to have a common vision, a common language when working with our stakeholders. It also really looks to building a responsive structure to address student needs. We've heard about data that we need to address some inefficiencies that are perhaps embedded in our current system, and how do we build a more responsive system? And this includes things about how do we really examine our master schedule to support all kids? How do we make sure teachers engage in inclusive practices to include all kids? And with this, we are building a responsive system.
And so looking at assessments, we don't have a lot of control over what assessments are out there to give. However, we do have control over how we analyze and interpret that data. And so we can look at the data as a whole, and that will paint one picture for us, and most likely it will show that we do pretty well for the majority of our students here in this district. However, we do need to begin to disaggregate that data and dig a little bit deeper, because then we can look at different subgroups of students and making sure that we are meeting the needs of every single student in our district. And so that brings us to resource allocation and utilization. So once we recognize, based on that disaggregation of data, that there is a problem and that there are specific groups of students that we need to better meet their needs, then we can really look at our human resources, our material resources, and allocate them in a way that does ensure that we are making every single student be successful. And then hopefully that will improve outcomes for all students.
So based on what they've said so far, one of the things we thought about is that when you know better, you must do better. So the fact that we know that there's an area for growth for us and that we know ways in which we can attack those areas, it's an opportunity for us to do better as we move forward. But one of the things as we work and talk about any type of plan moving forward, you want to make sure that everybody understands what it is and what it isn't. And when we've talked in the past about programs or about moving stuff forward, we've said this is what it is, this is what it isn't. For here, the integrated system is a framework. It's something by which the district follows as a collective whole. It's not a one-off or a program that you're putting in. It's actually something that the entire district, whether we're doing reading, writing, science, anything, it's embedded in what we are and who we are as a district, and becomes a process by which we all follow. But the key part is that it's grounded in the work of the building and the building teams that are put together in order to analyze and shift the current practices we have across the building. And it's important to note that obviously that shift takes time. This is not a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year. When you do systemic changes across a district, it takes multiple years. You can go back to looking at the furniture part. We started in 2013, we're in 2021. It's taken that long for us to process through, figure things out, and evaluate properly. This will obviously go a little bit faster, but it does take time for us to implement the framework across the district. I do feel like I'm the odd man out since I'm sitting way over here.
I know, Kevin's gonna speak.
Oh, Kevin gets to talk. Kevin's my teammate.
Thank you for that smooth handoff, Brian. So the next couple of slides, we'll just kind of highlight some of the features of the ICS model that are appealing. So there's an evidence-based, research based on over 45 years of work. This is intended to be a very proactive approach, which gets at the comments that have been made about it being a framework and a fairly involved process to go through, and that it's so comprehensive, it really stresses the success and the growth of all students, so across all student groups. And then also very appealing is there's built-in accountability to the process, so there are checkpoints and there's sort of an internal audit that we would go through to see how our progress is tracking. It's really heavily rooted in building teams, and the implementation occurs at that level, so there's a key element to that building team. And then it's predicated on a reallocation of existing resources. So you look at very comprehensive assessment of what you have in place, and you look to shift resources in a more effective manner. And then this next slide lays out, it's really a multi-year process. and it's a little bit hard to read the font there, but there's several steps that you go through over the course of 3 or more years. And so the sequence is laid out very nicely so that we can kind of track, and it creates a roadmap for our implementing it across the system. So it would take at least 3 years, possibly longer, to work our way through the 13 steps that are described on the different components of this slide.
So as I believe Matt mentioned, or maybe it was Brian, that the work is very much based in school teams, but it is a collective effort. The district leadership team, along with the school leadership team, would participate in institutes at 2 different levels. They would learn about the work, and last summer the cabinet team went through this training along with Natalie Jack Toro, it's one of our board members. And along with that, we not only learn about the work, but we learn how to lead that work. I think I have the next slides. So this is the Integrated Comprehensive Systems implementation timeline. And you can see that it does begin with a 2.5-hour evening with the Board of Ed, the district leadership team, our principals. And from there, we go into a 3-day institute. If you can go to the next slide, Matt. So in discussions throughout the year, this is a very intense work that would need to happen. And so given the situation of substitutes and people who would need to participate in the leadership team, we decided it really would be best to begin this work with our early childhood through 2nd grade teams and really focusing on that grade level band. When we look at, just for instance, the significantly disproportionate, that often begins at that level in early childhood and kindergarten, 1st and 2nd. And so to really dive in deep with that level of teachers and administrators to go through that Part 1 Institute and begin to implement. And we would do like a snowball effect where then we would roll in the 3-5 the following summer, begin to work with their teams, and then the 6-8 eventually with their team. So that's next couple slides. So as Brian stated, you know, this work will be ongoing, you know, over the next 5 years to do it right. Go to the last slide.
So can I just add one other
Yes.
comment, and then we can answer questions? But to boil some of this down a little bit, I think disproportionately identifying one group of students over another is a problem. It's not acceptable. And we need to use all of the resources at our disposal to unpack why that is. And it is a systemic approach that I think holds the key to helping us with this inequity, and that's what it is. We've learned one thing, I think, over time, which is that just spending money on this challenge isn't enough. So certainly the material and human resources are important, but there is a conceptual framework that needs to be laid out in an understandable fashion and embraced by everyone in the school district in order for us to right-size some of this. And that's what this is an attempt to do.
Does anyone want to open up with any questions?
So you mentioned, Mary talked about it, you just mentioned our disproportionality issue, and I mean, it is definitely something we need to address. Beyond that, the state tells us that there will be repercussions for us if we don't address it, correct? Mm-hmm.
Yes, I mean, we are on a watch list. And going back to the slide that was shared earlier, we cannot be above, what is it, 3%?
4.
We cannot be above 4%. So the first thing we need to do is, is drive that risk ratio down even further. I mean, we're certainly trending in the right direction, but we're not there yet.
We're still not. Yeah.
And then once we arrive there, I believe we need to be able to maintain that for at least 3 years.
Yes.
So when we talk about a multi-year sort of approach to this, it's true.
So, I mean, we definitely, this will address that and so much more.
That's our hope, yes,
Right.
absolutely.
So I just for clarity's sake, to go back to the very beginning when we talk about our learning gaps. Could you, Dr. Silverman, just address a little bit about how that impacts our whole district to have those learning gaps? And what exactly is, I mean, I've kind of been, board members kind of know what a learning gap is, but not everybody fully understands what that means and the impact that is on everybody in the district, not just those kids in that gap.
Yeah, well, when we're talking about the IAR as an example, we actually have to have as close or not have gaps between different student groups. When you do have these achievement gaps, so whether it's a demographic achievement gap, and what I mean by that is meets and exceeds on something like the English language arts test at 3rd grade, when children start taking that assessment. And so what we strive for is for every child to meet on that assessment.
Across all groups.
Across all groups, exactly right. The reality, though, is, and this has been this way for some time now, and again, you can see all this information, that particular public information, at the Illinois report card. We have some groups of children performing differently below, if you will, not meeting, compared to other groups of students that are meeting, and it creates that yes, a gap. It's a visual gap.
But that doesn't just affect the kids at the bottom.
Well,
It
so
affects the kids at the exceeding level too.
right. So those summative designations, one of the variables is indeed an achievement gap element. And when you expand that gap past a certain threshold, you are deemed underperforming. And we actually had that scenario now 4 years ago with Springman, and they were indeed placed, and that information is still in the Illinois report card on the underperforming designation. Now, the positive approach, it used to be through older federal educational acts or laws, sort of the punishment approach. The Every Student Succeeds Act, fortunately, they still put you on a bad, naughty list, which is not good for morale. However, they give you money. And the state had given, and actually they still give Springman money, which we're a little bit confused because over the usage of that money, which is looking at school improvement planning, other systems in terms of MTSS, and now this was very specific to Springman to illustrate an example. The staff tried some different learning opportunities, different interventions. They achieved reduced the gaps, and were able to come off of the list. So that's as real as, we lived through that very real example. That's the whole building is on the summative designation.
And so my point in all of this, where I'm going with this is, while people might not understand why we need to do that, it is truly for every student, is what you're telling us. It's not for groups of students. It might appear that way by the name or by some of the things we're talking about, but we need to undertake this for the sake of every single student, no matter where they are, at the top, at the bottom of the gap, or somewhere in between.
That's exactly right.
I'm laying the foundation for that.
So like a rising tide, it'll lift all boats?
Yes, but in particular, we need extra hands on deck for those subgroups that we talked about.
Well, yes.
Can I ask one more question before it looks like there's some requirements for us. Can you enumerate those for us?
We haven't scheduled or dove in deep into exactly what it's going to look like, but yes, it does begin with a 2.5-hour workshop with the board and the principals and the district leadership team. And, you know, after this evening, I will contact them and get more information if the board tells me to go ahead and do that.
Okay. James?
So I have a couple comments. So I think this is a good example, going back to my prior comment, which was not intended at all to be critical, but how you actually can use contiguous information to make informed choices, right? And so when the public goes and looks at our report card, the 2020 report card isn't going to look right, but it's because there's a massive data gap. Now, that said, just because we have a number, 4%, and I appreciate that that's a metric that's established, that doesn't mean it's not the right thing to do, regardless of what a metric is and whatever the number is picked. And so, you know, to me, I can't be more supportive about this. And I know we have a multi-year plan, but we can't do it fast enough. At the end of the day, like, I think that's one of the things that, you know, I think this board should certainly embrace, is that this is an opportunity, and it's also, you know, we're responsible for this. Also, starting with K-2, I think is really, really intelligent, and I just want to kind of get out there that, you know, if you can't read by 3rd grade, you are disproportionately and beyond disproportionately, you know, challenged to learn at 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, because it's so fundamental in terms of reading comprehension and kind of keeping pace. And so I certainly want to make that comment and appreciate that's where we're starting on the K-2. And then the last thing is that, you know, the challenges don't stop, or I guess they're not only just present during school hours. And so, you know, whether it's something that the administration, the board, but certainly anybody that's kind of listening to our discussion certainly need to engage across the community, because the community is not just within the 4 walls of a school. It is truly much more than just the child or the teacher. It is the community. And I think it's on all of us, and certainly would encourage the village and anybody else that can also participate in this same type of framework, but extend it beyond and for other services on behalf of our children, to ensure that this does not only run, you know, 178 days a year between 8:40 and 2:40 or 3:30 p.m. That this really has a continuous and lasting transformative impact on our children from the get-go. So thank you. I'm excited to participate, and I certainly appreciate that this is the platform that we're going forward, knowing that it's a need for all students, but specifically those that need that support. So thank you.
Thanks, James. Great comment. Anyone else? Jim?
I'm just curious about what ICS, like, that's just like a new organization that I've not seen before. Like, I don't know, how did you land on that, or like, why them? Are they consultants? Did we pay them? Like, how do they fit into this process? Like, what is that all about?
I can speak to that. Actually, years ago, I learned about their work out of the University of Madison, Wisconsin. And when I was researching, like, what, you know, the best in how to educate students with disabilities, when I came to Glenview, Kurt Schneider from True North, the superintendent there, is also very involved in this work. So we had many conversations on it. It is work that I have been following for a while, and so we really wanted to be able to bring it to the district, and then there was a pandemic. And so the timing, you know, wasn't right. But their research is, as one of the gentlemen said, 45 years of research in terms of how school systems, and how it's the system and not the students, and how school systems are set up for, you know, certain, you'll learn about all this, but for certain students to not succeed in the way that we are structured. And so restructuring how we allocate our resources is a huge piece to this after you learn and understand the why behind it. So that is how it, and you know, it isn't about reading a book and changing. It is about exactly what James mentioned, transformational type of work that you undertake.
Are there examples, are there school districts that are like ahead of us that have done this? Like, if you said, a couple examples that we could look up and say, oh yeah, look what they did.
Yes, there are.
Yes, we can share that.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And when we go through that presentation, I'm sure that that'll be focused on that too. Yes.
Good. Diane, do you have anything you want to add? All right. John? All right. Thanks for the discussion. Glad we're starting down this path. I'll move along to the 2022-2023 school calendar.
Thank you. So This is the board's first read of the draft calendar for 22-23. Just a couple of highlights on the calendar as it's designed and proposed, primarily due to a construction timeline that we've talked about extensively and is very much going to impact next year and the year beyond. We're proposing starting the school year 1 week later than typical, which would mean then going, of course, 1 week later in June. We've added 2 staff days to the front of the school year, again anticipating a delayed access for staff to their classrooms. So these days are intended to be very necessary days to ready classrooms for children, unpack, align furniture, all of that. Hopefully receive furniture and have it in place. The other highlights would be we put the Institute Day for the fall in September. Gives us an opportunity to address important subjects with staff earlier in the year so it can be applicable throughout the school year. We have aligned the winter breaks and spring breaks with District 225 as typical. Some of the other alignments that we're able to do most years, just because of that late start that I described and the late ending, we don't align quite as cleanly with 225 on those ends. And then the rest of the holidays and days off are basically driven by state and federal holidays. We have access to all the waivers that we have for the state holidays, so many of those days we are in session, such as Veterans Day, Lincoln's birthday, to preserve as many whole weeks or to make the weeks as impacted minimally by those sorts of holidays throughout. And so the start date for students would be the 25th of August, and the last day for students would be June 8th. And there's a staff date then at the end of the year as well. I'd be happy to entertain any questions. We would anticipate then approval in January board meeting.
All right, is there any questions about the calendar?
I know in past years, like, I think Heather would always describe it like there weren't hardly any choices to make. Like when you put all those constraints on it, like only one option pops out. Was that kind of the case this year? Or were there any tough choices you need to make in the recommendation?
No, we had quite a bit of discussion around those additional 2 staff days to start the year, but really viewed them at all levels, cabinet with staff, as really essential. That was kind of a new variable this year. We don't usually start the year with 3 days like that. That was one. Lots of discussions with teaching and learning about the ideal timing for an Institute Day, and we looked carefully at other days off to try to be thoughtful about where that was placed. So you're right, everything else kind of fell, other than those examples, it fell kind of to form.
Well, I mean, at 3 of the schools, it's going to be a completely different flow, too. You get all new classrooms we've never experienced, so that's a lot of things for people to take into place.
Exactly.
Great, thanks. Next, is everybody okay moving on? Board policy update, press issue 108, comprehensive, lot to read there.
Yeah, so this is, we certainly understand there's a lot there. That's why we do these 2 reads, essentially. This is our first cut at that. We have put the recommendations forward. And just as a reminder, they're first given to us by the Illinois Association of School Boards, but we internally spend time and vet through the policies. We interpret the suggestions that they're making. Sometimes we adopt the suggestions and sometimes we don't, depending on what our internal practices here in the district happen to look like.
And a lot of some of these changes are actually reactions to current changes in laws and new laws that were passed.
Yes. Yes.
And just references to some new laws possibly.
Correct.
Okay. It's really good reading, so we'll read it again before we approve it. Great.
For the second quote-unquote reading?
Yes. All right. Any questions on it right now? All right. And next, it brings us to our 4-year copy lease.
Yeah, just to get, I think it's working. Just to give a little background, we have for the last year and a half been off a copier lease. We actually purchased our copiers for $1 upon the completion of the 2020 school year and that unique time frame that we experienced then. It did perfectly match with us for this past year, not this year currently, in the sense that we owned them for a year, paid no lease. All we did is pay service, understanding that at a time when those stopped to be necessary or working at the level that we wanted, we needed to provide an opportunity for an additional lease. So we did go out to bid. We had 4 companies provide specs back to us. 3 of those companies came in very, very competitive. 2 of those companies were within $100 out of 300 and some thousand, and then $15 on the, we compared it twice, 2 different scenarios. We did end up going with our incumbent, the organization that currently, and company that currently supports our products, with Canon as our copiers. They are a local company and they're in Northbrook. They're a Canon provider. They do all of our support now.
Are they very responsive to?
Yeah, well, yes, and especially right now when our copiers are not at the level that they probably should be at. They have had, they're at their end of life right now, and we knew that that was going to take place. That we had a little hiccup in our first bid process, in the sense that we wanted to make sure everything was analyzed exactly, and the bids came back in with different interpretations. So we went back out for bid with a clearer picture on exactly what we wanted. And yeah, they're very responsive, even with the repair rate that we have going on right now.
Does anyone else have any questions?
It's already budgeted for, and the budget's actually reduced from what we had before, ironically.
I like that we didn't just jump into another lease. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
And that's our goal, is if we can manage to keep these 5.5 years, it's great, and something to move forward with, which we didn't do in the past and started moving forward with this year, or 2 years ago.
Anybody else?
I would just copy your comment.
Oh. Ditto.
I was
from
hoping
John.
someone would get that.
Ditto.
Yeah. I said-
That's good too.
You mimeographer. Okay. That brings us to audience comments. Kathy, do we have any audience comments tonight, right now? Okay. We'll move along to the reports section. We have the number 1 FOIA report, number 2 True North Board meeting report, the number 3 referendum expense report, the number 4 Phase 1 construction change order report, the number 5 budget status report, the number 6 memo to establish a fiscal year and authorize development of the 2023 budget, number 7 the current year financial projections, number 8 referendum construction estimate update on phases 2 and 3, and number 9 the following meeting agenda. Are there any questions on those reports that are in our documents?
Scott, I don't have a question, but I wanted to just bring to everybody's attention that at the December 8th True North meeting, it started with a recognition for one of our very own District 34 students, Aoi Matsuzuki, who is a 6th grader at Arbor Academy. Mary Garrity was there to help honor Aoi and her progress, and it was inspiring, and we should all congratulate her on her hard work. So it was a proud District 34 moment.
Thanks, Natalie. Thanks for reporting that. And thanks for your service on True North. Anyone else
Yeah.
with the report?
On number 6, this memo to establish a fiscal year and authorize development, why is that in the report section? Like, is that actually something we have to approve or do something about? I mean, it's a resolution.
You know, I think that's historically where it's been placed. I'm not sure it's a requirement that there's formal board action. I think it's more just of an acknowledgement that, you know, right around the time where we're finalizing projections, this is the time. It's a year-long process, so, you know, I can't defend why it's actually called resolution, but I'm not sure it's actually a legal requirement. It's more of just a way to establish. We'll start working on it now.
So for transparency measures, we're putting it this way so everyone can hear that we're talking about it?
I believe so.
Yeah. You signed it, Scott.
I do.
Yeah,
I
it says
will.
on there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you will too?
Tonight, you're a signer also? No. I'm the only one that signs that one.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It says secretary.
It says secretary.
So let's look into that and just make sure we don't have a statutory regulation that we have to
Yeah,
do.
no problem.
Do that. We don't vote on the reports, do we?
No.
No, it says, we just want to make sure we're not supposed to vote on this, as it says, you usually vote on resolutions.
Right. It's a good question. Check it out, would you? Thanks. Anything else in the
And
report section?
the current year financial projection, if I'm just reading that correctly, it's kind of like the current projection is break even, right?
At this point, that's correct.
The budget was like minus 2 million, but there's like that local 1.8.
Assuming all other budgeted revenues and expenses come to fruition, then yes, that's.
Yeah, that's the best estimate right now, just making sure, okay.
All right. Great, moving along to other business. Anyone have any other business they want to bring up? All right, I'm going to go to adjournment, and I'm going to declare the meeting adjourned. Thanks for coming. Thanks to everybody who's watching, and thanks for all the comments tonight. Take care.